Vice President J.D. Vance and senior envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are headed to Pakistan to begin peace talks with Iran. President Trump says he expects Iran to comply with the ceasefire terms ahead of planned negotiations this weekend. Trump warned that if not, he'll order large-scale attacks on the country. President Trump also cautioned Tehran against imposing tolls on tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, he said Iran is doing a, quote, very poor job of allowing oil to pass through the waterway. Marine transit data shows only about a dozen ships have gone through the strait since the ceasefire went into effect. That's far less than normal. And CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now with more on this. Nancy, good morning. So what are we learning about these peace talks?
Well, Michael, Vice President Vance is slated to depart from Joint Base Andrews this morning to make his way to Islamabad, Pakistan for those talks tomorrow. The White House says he is only going to be there for 1 day. He's not even spending the night. But this comes as the ceasefire continues to display some weak spots. The president expressing his anger yesterday. Despite that, the White House says it is pushing ahead with these talks.
Safe passage is secured. Strait of Hormuz is open.
That was Iran's deputy foreign minister insisting that ships can now coordinate with Iran's military to safely travel through the Strait of Hormuz for the first time in 6 weeks. But the numbers tell a different story. Only 3 oil tankers braved the narrow waterway Thursday, and at least one was Iranian. President Trump posting last night, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. That is not the agreement we have. The Iranians said this was not in the agreement. Another day of Israeli strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, despite Trump's claim that Israel's prime minister had agreed to go, quote, low-key a little bit on the bombings. Iran's president said the strikes in Lebanon, quote, will render negotiations meaningless. Our fingers remain on the trigger. Despite those tensions, Vice President Vance is making the 15-hour flight to Islamabad, Pakistan today to hold talks with the Iranians tomorrow. He is the highest-level U.S. official to make direct diplomatic contact with Iran since President Jimmy Carter visited the Shah in Tehran in 1978. Democrats tried again yesterday to rein in Trump's war powers, but the vote was blocked by Republicans.
This ceasefire is a joke. This war should never have happened in the first place, and Congress deserves a say, and the American people deserve a say.
Even after Vice President Vance leaves Pakistan, U.S. negotiators are going to stay behind to try to hammer out this very tricky deal with the Iranians. And then next week, Lebanese and Israeli officials are set to travel here to Washington, D.C. to sit down at the State Department to discuss that conflict and try to figure out a way out. Michael?
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you for joining us. Well, pressure is on Pakistan as it steps in as an unlikely mediator in these high-stakes peace talks between the U.S. and Iran. The world is watching to see if a long-term truce will be reached. Humza Jilani is a Pakistan correspondent at the Financial Times, and he joins us now from Islamabad, where these peace talks are taking place. Humza, thanks so much for joining us. I want to see if you can give us some perspective. How did Pakistan find itself in such a central role, and who are the key players there?
So thanks for having me, Michael. And Pakistan's found itself in this place because it's a rare country that has, deep ties to Iran, deep ties to the Gulf, which have been battered by Iranian missiles lately. And most importantly, over the last year, the Field Marshal Asim Munir, the military leader of Pakistan and its most powerful figure, has a deep personal relationship with Donald Trump, forged in the last year. They shared a lunch shortly amid the June war last year, and he's had multiple White House meetings during which he's pitched everything from counterterrorism cooperation, crypto cooperation, cooperation on renovating a hotel in Manhattan owned by the Pakistan government, and twice nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And through this charm offensive, he's built a deep enough personal relationship that dovetails with his country's historic relationship with Iran to be one of the few places that could bridge these countries that have been so far apart over the last few weeks.
And you talk about Pakistan's ties to those countries. They also have a relationship with China. So how big an influence does Beijing hold here?
So Beijing is clearly a major player here. It's a major fossil fuel importer from Iran and a very close ally of Pakistan's. Pakistan is, again, one of those rare countries that has such deep ties to DC, Tehran, and Beijing. And China has played a role here. We're not sure exactly because they've been somewhat quiet in terms of their public role, but Pakistan's foreign minister, Ishaq Dar, traveled to Beijing some weeks ago to get Chinese support for what they called a 5-point plan. And sources were saying behind the scenes, Beijing was constantly in touch with Tehran after that meeting, trying to impress upon them the importance of taking a ceasefire, specifically for maintaining stability in the global economy.
Now, Humza, how big of a test is this for Pakistan?
I think it's a big test. Pakistan has been trying to cast itself as a regional provider of stability. They're a country that has struggled with difficult headlines in the last few years. They're a place that didn't get a phone call from President Joe Biden for almost the entirety of his presidency. And so they were looking for a way to recast themselves as a kind of useful player, both for the U.S. and for the region. And I think right now what we're going to see is a real test of Pakistan's ability to translate the deep relationships and diplomatic tightrope that it's been walking into real diplomatic dividends for the world. If they're able to bring the U.S. and Iran together on some kind of new agreement where the parties currently sit so far apart on things like putting a toll on the strait or returning to hostilities, support for Iran's ballistic missile program or its proxies throughout the region. If they're able to find a way to bring the parties together, then that will be a big testament to Pakistan's claim of being a sort of provider of security in the region. But it's a very tall task. I mean, diplomats here have been really trying to set expectations. They're proud to have even gotten this far, that they've been able to play a role in getting a ceasefire, getting J.D. Vance to come to Islamabad, have the talks hopefully start tomorrow. But it's going to be, in some ways, the most difficult part starts now.
All right, Humza Jilani, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.